Hello everyone, and welcome along to my F1 2021 predictions using the F1 2020 game. So this video then, I'm going to make some predictions based on what I think the performance of each team will be in Formula 1 in 2021, and then we're going to apply those predictions to the F1 game so we can see a virtual world race of exactly how that performance will play out between the teams. Before we get started, I should touch on exactly what the changes are in 2021. So for the most part, everything's been frozen. There's not much change they can make to the chassis and that sort of thing. They've got development tokens they can use. They've mostly frozen the development, at least of the chassis, so that to try and reduce costs ahead of a big rule change next year in 2022. Outside of that, they have actually made some changes this season. It's primarily aimed at reducing the downforce levels a little bit on the car. So it's primarily around the floor. They've also done some brake ducts. It's almost exclusively around the rear of the car. They have just made some changes. It's supposed to reduce downforce by sort of 5% or so, but I imagine the teams will actually end up clawing back quite a bit of that. But of course, if they didn't make those changes, they'd end up with even more downforce, and they just wanted to stop the downforce levels getting out of control this season. In addition to that, there's some brand new Pirelli tyres that they've brought. All the drivers were moaning last year about these tyres, but I think in reality they'll probably just do a little bit less grip and probably also be a bit more durable. So for those, I've reduced the grip by around about 2% or so, and then reduced the tyre wear by about 3% or so. So they last a little bit longer, but they do get a little bit less grip. That's of course just a guesstimation. It's hard to know, isn't it? But until the cars are really on the tyres. But I guess that's what this video is all about. Now, before we get into my predictions, I should say a big shout out to Lucas Designs, because I have used his visual mods in this video to make it seem more like the 2021 grid rather than just using the 2020 liveries with my 2021 performance. So he has provided a really cool mod that does almost all of the 2021 liveries and the changes and that kind of thing. It does most of the liveries. They weren't quite all in at the time of making this video, but I had to use some other ones. He's done most of the helmets for most of the driver swaps, also the faces. He's even updated the safety car to be a red Mercedes. So it's a really cool mod, so do check that one out down in the description. I should also give a shout out to Punk CM61, who's done the Williams and Haas liveries for me, because as I said at the time of making this video, Lucas Designs hadn't done either of those. Also another shout out to Alessio088 for providing the driver name change mod. This isn't easily possible in the game. You actually have to use the cheat engine to kind of like hack in the driver name changes, which is a bit weird. But anyway, shout out to him for running that mod. And one final shout out to Kine, who's a valuable member of the Alex Gilling community. And he has actually just helped me kind of put all these mods together and kind of make it all work. So certain bits, he's really good with livery mods. There's certain bits that I wasn't sure how to do, and he's really helped me with that. So big shout out to all those guys for making this video possible. Link to all of their stuff is down in the description below. So, what is my mod going to be then? So on top of those visual 2021 mods, I have also modified the performance. Now, my prediction is going to be based on a combination of the performance from the 2020 F1 game, and then a combination of that and also of what I think will happen in real life in 2021. Now, obviously, you know, it's hard to get a real handle on exactly how much downforce or drag each car had in real life. So that's why I'm using the game figures for that. And then I'll use how I think they'll do this season. So, for example, Williams, I think they'll have a really good season this season. I think they'll come forward a long way. So I'll actually increase the games figures from what they were in the game last year up by X amount that I think they will improve by. So it's kind of a amalgamation, I suppose, of the game and my real life predictions. They come together to show what I think the final performance will be for the 2021 season. Just before we get into my performance predictions for the 2021 F1 season, I'm here to ask you to please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you enjoy this kind of content, if you enjoy kind of modded content, F1 game content, F1 content, racing content, anything like that, all of that good stuff is on my channel. So press the big red button down below. This video alone has taken something like, I think it's about 17 hours to make. To be honest, I'm quite glad that it is now done. It is now 9 o'clock UK time on the day the video will be released. It was all day yesterday, all day today. It's been a big project. There was lots to do. Obviously, I had to make the mod itself. I had to incorporate the other mods, test it all, make sure it all worked, record all the content, edit it, commentate it. There's been a lot to do. It's been a good project though. Hopefully you guys do enjoy this video, and hopefully you have some good conversations on my predictions. But as I said, please do hit the big red button down below. It does genuinely really help a channel my size, and that would be much appreciated, especially on this 17-hour video. Let's get into my predictions. Let's get into it then. The first team is going to be Mercedes. Of course, a largely unchanged team from last season. They've got the same driver lineup, more or less the same livery, just got the AMG branding is more or less the only thing they changed. Also, as far as I'm aware, for staff structure and that kind of thing, remaining largely unchanged. So for me, they are going to be the team to beat, I believe. Now, you can see here, this is going to be the way I'm going to show you my performance predictions. So it's broken down between power, weight, front downforce, rear downforce, drag, tyre grip and tyre wear. So I mentioned earlier in the video that the tyre wear from the Pirellis, they're bringing new tyres, so I think they'll lose around about 2% tyre grip and around about 3% tyre wear, as in the tyres will last sort of 3% longer or so. That'll be the same for all cars, but I thought I'd include it in this graph just so you got an idea exactly what I've changed in this video. So starting from the beginning then, the power, I believe they'll gain around about 1% power. You know, they're going to gain some power, aren't they, season on season? But of course, they're very much looking at a law of diminishing returns. And I think with this Mercedes engine, it's been on top for so long. Others are starting to catch up. So I think they'll have a little improvement, but not a huge improvement. In terms of the weight, there's obviously a minimum weight. I assume Mercedes won the minimum weight. Really, the weight only really comes into the smaller teams, which I'll get into when we get to those. Front downforce-wise, I've actually kept this the same because most of the changes to the regulations this season are on the rear of the car. Now, most of the teams have actually used their development tokens on the front end of the car, but I believe that's mainly because they want to change the way the air flows over the car more than they want to excessively reduce the front downforce. I think they will lose some rear downforce. That's where most of the changes have gone. So you can see there, I've dropped the rear downforce by around about 3% or so. But the front downforce, I think they'll end up keeping it largely the same. They'll just end up with a bit more of a front end car that just, you know, has a really nice pointy front end that turns into the corners really nicely. I don't think they'll actually reduce that by too much. I will say as well, you see there's a 2021 option plus a game option. That is because basically in this game you can't make the AI drive any faster, so I could give them 4 times the amount of downforce they normally have. I can't actually make them drive faster, so because of that I just actually have to reduce the downforce of the top teams in order to get them to actually, you know, kind of drive at the pace that I want them to drive at effectively. So what I've done is I've reduced the downforce by 4% for every single car. For every one of my predictions, I've just taken 4% off it, just to get it below a level that they were last year in order to get the AI to race each other. Bit of a technical point, but I thought I'd just throw that in there anyway. Onto the drag then. So I think Mercedes will lose around about 2% drag. As I said, there's some downforce changes. I think, you know, that will just affect them. The floor in particular, that's got to now be almost completely flat. So I think that is going to just reduce the drag very slightly. Of course, they will increase the drag in other areas, which is why it's only a little 2% drop there for Mercedes. And as I said, I do think Mercedes are going to be the team to beat this year. However, I do think Red Bull will be very, very close to them. Of course, again, a team that is largely unchanged in terms of livery. However, driver change up, big change. Alexander Albon is now stepping down. Sergio Perez is stepping up. Really excited to see how he does. He's been such a solid performer in the Force India Racing Point team. So I'm really excited that he's got the opportunity to drive Red Bull. And I'm excited to see if he can get somewhere near Max Verstappen's performance, who of course is always a mega driver. In terms of my predictions then, so I do think they'll gain quite a lot of power. Honda are bringing a new engine, an all-new engine to the car in 2021. So I reckon they'll gain around about 2.5% or so performance compared to what they were last year, which is a big gain. You know, they've already come out and said that we think they're on Mercedes level. I suspect they mean last year's Mercedes level, so that's exactly what I've given them, given the exact same engine of last year's Mercedes. I think Honda will make a big jump here, which is really good for them, but I don't think they'll quite be on a par with what Mercedes are, just because, you know, they are very much the team to beat. Weight-wise, just keeping that exactly the same because, of course, they'll be on the minimum limit. Front downforce-wise, again, same as Mercedes. So in the 2020 game, Red Bull and Mercedes actually had the exact same downforce, and I've kept them with the exact same downforce because I do think, even though in real life I'm sure Mercedes had a bit more, I do think this year Red Bull will make a little bit of a step forward, and I think they'll be very, very close to Mercedes. So what I've done is I've just effectively held their downforce the same as it was last year in the game, at least. Drag-wise, they were very, very slightly less draggy than Mercedes last season in the 2020 game. I've kept them the same this season just to keep the numbers nice and easy. So in terms of those figures, the only one that they're actually worse than Mercedes on is the engine, and only by 1%. Now, of course, in real life, I'm sure that the dynamic between those different stats will be slightly different, but I do think they'll be very, very close, and we hopefully will get a good title challenge this season between Mercedes and Red Bull. I think the third fastest car in 2021 is actually going to be the Ferrari. Now, of course, they were only, the 6th fastest car last season because of some well-documented woes. Of course, slightly new driver lineup. They've got Carlos Sainz coming in to replace Sebastian Vettel. I'm sure there's been lots of staff changes as well in the back end. A slightly changed livery with that, I'm going to say it, ugly green bit, but I don't think that'll be raced anyway. But they've got the darker red also on the rear. So a couple of little changes there for Ferrari. In terms of performance, I think similar to Red Bull / Honda, they will actually have a good gain for their engine. You know, they got caught effectively cheating a couple of seasons ago, so last season was always a compromise season. I think they'll recover most of those gains this season without cheating, hopefully. So I think they'll be pretty much on a par with kind of what Mercedes were last season and what Honda I think will be this season. So I think they'll have largely similar engine to Honda and what Mercedes had last year. Weight-wise, of course, they're on the minimum weight limits. That will stay exactly the same. Downforce-wise, I think they will actually increase the downforce by quite a bit. I've given it an increase there of around about 2.5% or so, which is a solid chunk, and would put them only just behind, only about 1% or so behind Ferrari. Sorry, only 1% behind Mercedes and Red Bull. You know, they're such a big team. They've got hundreds of millions of pounds at their disposal. They've got so many aerodynamicists. Last year, surely was the odd one out. I can't see that happening time and time again. Surely they can get it sorted and improve their downforce hugely over people like McLaren. You know, they have to, surely. Similarly with the rear downforce, they're going to be 1% behind on both front and rear, I've put there. And drag-wise, I think they'll reduce their drag quite a bit. Last year, they were, according to the game, 4% more draggy than the Mercedes. I think they'll be similar drag levels to last year's Mercedes, but actually about 2% more draggy than Mercedes. I don't think, you know, they're such a draggy car. I don't think they can turn around overnight and suddenly be, you know, have barely any drag. I think they'll still be a slightly draggy car, just less so than last season. On to McLaren then, who I think will be the 4th fastest team. McLaren have actually got probably the biggest change of any team. Of course, they've signed a brand new driver in Daniel Ricciardo, who's obviously a very known, good performer, so I'm sure he'll do a great job for them. They've also got a brand new engine, of course. They've got the Mercedes engine. They're the only team this season to change engines, going from the Renault engine, which is not known for its performance, should we say, to the best performing Mercedes engine. So I think that will give them a good step forward. You can see there, I've brought them up to, of course, Mercedes levels. But last season, of course, they were down on Renault levels. So I think they'll gain several percent in terms of power for this season. Onto the weight, of course, you know, in the game, they did actually have a 0.8% above the weight limit. I'm sure in real life they're on the minimum weight limit, so I've put that down to the minimum. Downforce-wise, I think they'll be about 0.5% or so behind Ferrari. I think they'll be really close to Ferrari. You know, they were better than Ferrari last season. They had a better car than Ferrari last season. But with Ferrari's, you know, resource levels, I can't see them beating Ferrari this season. Maybe it will happen, but I think they'll be very close, which is an achievement considering the difference in the budgets. The drag then, I think they'll be something like, somewhere between Mercedes and Ferrari levels of drag. You see, they'll put them about 1% draggier than Mercedes and 1% less drag than Ferrari. So that could give them the advantage at certain circuits, because I think they did have quite an efficient car last season in terms of drag. So I'm excited to see how they get on with their 2021 challenge. I think McLaren will be the best of the rest effectively in 2021. Onto the new Aston Martin then. I say new, of course, it was Racing Point last year and Force India the years before that. That's quite a big change, of course, a big name change, complete colour scheme change as well. It is, of course, largely the same team under the skin. Big signing, though, they've got Sebastian Vettel driving for them this season, replacing the outgoing Sergio Perez, of course, 4-time world champion. I'm really excited to see how he gets on. You know, the Ferrari environment, maybe it wasn't suiting him. He seemed to be struggling the last couple of seasons. He did the same at Red Bull and then was kind of almost a new man when he first signed for Ferrari. So hopefully it'll be the same for him when he starts at Aston Martin. Hopefully he can have some really good performance. Of course, finally getting the Mercedes engine as well for him, because he went from the Renault engine, of course, to the Ferrari engine. Now he's going to be with the Mercedes engine. So hopefully that bodes well for Sebastian Vettel. Moving on to the performance then, of course, they are going to have the Mercedes engine, same as they did last season, so I think they'll be slightly ahead of the rest of the pack in terms of engine performance. Weight-wise, again, the game actually had them 0.3% overweight. I've actually kept them as 0.3% overweight, because honestly, I don't really know, you know, none of us know whether any of the teams are overweight. They may all be on the minimum weight limit. I imagine the teams, lower teams like Haas and Williams, I imagine they struggle a bit more for the weight limit. But you never know. But I've just kept that because, to be honest, it's such a negligible amount, isn't it? 0.3%. It is just absolutely nothing at all. Downforce-wise, I think, again, they'll be a little bit behind McLaren. I've put them 0.5% of downforce behind McLaren. Not much at all, just a little touch. But I do think there'll be slightly worse performance. But overall, you know, a fairly decent gain relative to Mercedes, at least, season to season, I think they'll be. Same with the rear downforce, of course. They're going to lose some rear downforce, just like all the other teams, really. And they'll be about 0.5% down or so on McLaren. Drag-wise, I put them exactly the same as McLaren. They've always built a fairly efficient car, I think largely similar to McLaren. Essentially what I'm saying is I think they'll have a very similar car to McLaren, just a little bit worse. You know, they did have a great season last season. I think this season, I just do think they'll struggle a little bit. You know, they've only just rebranded as Aston Martin, although Aston Martin were kind of owning the team for most of last season. But I do think they won't quite have been able to make use of those funds. I suspect they're more preparing for the upcoming budget cap. So I just don't think they'll be able to make a big leap. I just think they'll be kind of largely where they were last season, really, but overall closer to Mercedes. On to Alpine then. Is it Alpine? I'm not sure yet. Of course, the old Renault team, they've had quite a big change this season, completely rebranding. I think it's under the same ownership. It's certainly the same kind of umbrella brand, but of course, no longer the Renault team. It's now the Alpine team. Completely rebranded the livery, and actually one of my favourite liveries this season. So a really, really nice livery that they've put on. That's a big shout out to them. Of course, big driver change. Once again, they're bringing in two-time world champion Fernando Alonso to replace the outgoing Daniel Ricciardo. Really excited to have him back on the grid. He's entertaining, if nothing else. I'm sure he'll provide some really good excitement for us. Onto the performance then. Of course, their engine isn't the best. That's the only engine that I'm saying will be not quite as good as last season's Mercedes. I put about 1% behind last season's Mercedes because I just, their track record recently has not been good. They've been the worst season ever since Honda moved to Red Bull, really, and got their act together. They've just not been a great performer in terms of the engine performance. That's why I put them 1% behind. I just can't see them, suddenly having an incredible engine. Just past performance is too strong for me. Weight-wise, again, the game had 0.7% overweight, so I've just left them as that. Downforce-wise, I think they'll be, again, slightly behind Aston Martin, but, they should have a big enough budget now that they should be right there. Last season, they had a decent car. It seemed to be a bit inconsistent, interestingly. Hopefully, they'll improve their consistency this year. But, yeah, again, I think they'll just be right in that midfield battle with McLaren, Aston Martin, Alpine, or themselves, rather. But I do think they'll just be behind those previous two teams. Similar rear downforce, of course, losing a bit of rear downforce, but I reckon they'll retain a lot of their front downforce. Drag-wise, in the game at least, they were actually the least draggy car last season. They had 4% less drag than Mercedes. I don't know if that was true to real life. It's hard to get those sort of figures. I do think they built quite an efficient car, though, so I've still put them as less drag than Mercedes, but only 1% less. I think, with bottom some downforce and stuff, they're bound to gain a bit of drag. Look at teams like Williams in 2014. It was incredibly slippery car, should we say. Didn't have much drag, but then, teams inevitably pile on drag as they try and find downforce. So I think they'll be slightly more draggy than last season. On to AlphaTauri then. Not many changes this season. Of course, they have had a driver change, but for the most part, it is the same. They've effectively inverted their livery, so it's largely the same livery, but it is a subtle change. Of course, brand new driver, though, Daniel Kvyat is no longer driving for them. They will now have Yuki Tsunoda, who I'm really excited to see. He's been a good talent in F2, so I'm excited to see how he gets on in Formula 1. Hopefully, he doesn't succumb to the Red Bull young driver machine that seems to churn up a few drivers. Hopefully, he can perform well and get somewhere near Pierre Gasly's pace. Of course, Gasly had some great performances lately. He's a really strong driver these days, so hopefully he can be somewhere near Pierre Gasly and he can call that a good result. Onto their performance then. Again, they got the Honda engine, so I imagine they'll be largely on the pace of last year's Mercedes engine. So it was a decent gain relative to the Mercedes engine of last year, or to the Mercedes engine this year, I suppose. A decent gain overall in terms of the best performing engine is what I mean to say. They are actually 1.1% overweight in the game. I've reduced that slightly down to 1% overweight. I don't know if they are actually. Again, it's impossible to know. I've just left it largely the same just because I didn't want to change the game parameters too much. Downforce-wise then, I do think they will have a kind of okay car. The AlphaTauri team, the Toro Rosso team, tends to be quite good at kind of building a midfield car. It has the occasional incredible result, but for the most part it sits, solidly sort of midfield. But I just think they now start to fall off the back a little bit of McLaren, Aston Martin and Alpine. I just can't see them, all three of those teams have got their act together. They've got good budgets now, and I just can't see them holding a torch to them unless they can get a huge amount of help from Red Bull, but I know they've been reluctant to do so in the past. So I think they'll kind of hold their place, but actually be just slightly off the back of the midfield. You see they're giving about 1.5% less downforce than the Alpine team, because I just don't think they'll be quite there. On to drag then. I do think they'll have largely the same drag as the as the Alpine, I should say. They had I think they'll just reduce the drag slightly because of the downforce changes. They had a fairly slippery car last season. I think they'll just be reduced very slightly. On to Alfa Romeo then, another team that's remaining largely unchanged. Again, similarly, they've sort of inverted their livery really, haven't they? Similar to what AlphaTauri did. So it's largely the same livery, the exact same lineup. They've got Raikkonen and Giovinazzi driving for them. So not much has changed for the kind of team's info, I guess you could call it. Performance-wise, I don't think they're going to have a great season, to be honest. I mean, they've still got the Ferrari engine. Hopefully that'll have a good step forward. I'll put it there. The same performance as last year's Mercedes engine. Weight, again, in the game, it is slightly overweight. They've put it as 1.4% overweight in the game. I'll reduce that to 1%. Again, it's hard to know that what it actually is in real life. Downforce-wise, I do actually think they'll have to trim off a little bit of downforce. They didn't have a great car last season. I can't see them turning it around suddenly this season. Next season, hopefully, when there's a big rule change. But with this season, I just can't see any big rule changes happening. I think they'll remain largely where they were last season, off the back of the midfield, never really able to properly challenge for points consistently, although Kimi did a good job of kind of being hovering around 10th. But but never really being much higher than that. And I think actually, if anything, they'll fall back from the midfield a little bit this season. So I'm not expecting a great result from them. Drag-wise, yeah, you can see that I've just very slightly reduced their drag because, of course, again, the rear downforce changes. On to Williams then, who isn't the last team I'm mentioning, so I don't think they'll be the worst performing team in 2021. But of course, again, pretty much unchanged team. They've got that new livery. I don't know how to describe that livery. I don't like it, is what I would say. Completely unchanged driver lineup, and it's largely the same team as last season. Of course, they are now under new ownership, but that was quite late on in the day that happened. It did happen sort of mid last season or so. So I can't see that making a big difference this season, so it is a largely unchanged team for me. Power-wise, of course, they have got the Mercedes engine, so they should be on good form there. I think they'll have about 1% more power, just the same as Mercedes will have. Weight-wise, the game had them 1.8% overweight. I've just reduced that slightly to bring up their performance, because I do think they will be able to produce a pretty decent car this season. You know, I said there I've leapt them forward quite a bit. You know, they showed relatively promising signs last season. You know, they've gone from being miles off the back to being kind of only just off the back. They've had decent gains against Mercedes the last couple of seasons. You know, I don't think they'll be able to make a huge jump, but I do think they'll be able to just leapfrog and just not quite be the worst performing team. You see that I've actually still taken a little bit of front. Sorry, I've actually given them some front downforce, just because you know, I do think they'll gain a good chunk. If I give them that, I'll give them about 3.5% downforce on the front, which is a decent chunk. Rear downforce, of course, they are going to lose some, just because that's just the nature of it. But overall, I think they are actually going to gain some, because the rule changes will take some away from them. I think they'll actually gain some. Drag-wise, I think they'll actually reduce the drag. They were, again, in the game 6% draggier than Mercedes last season. They were a really draggy car. I do think they'll have be able to improve that and just overall improve their downforce package. And as I said, leapfrog ahead of. Moving on then to my last place team, which I'm giving to Haas. They've got quite a changed team this season, of course. They've got a huge new sponsor. They've got 2 new drivers, one of which I will mention is Mick Schumacher. The other one I am not willing to mention as yet, because he hasn't earned the privilege to be mentioned by me at the moment. Yeah, so quite a changed car. Of course, very different livery as well. Largely, though, the team remains the same. I don't know if they've got more budget from the Russian sponsorship. I imagine they probably have. But I don't know if that's going to make a difference to them this season. And performance-wise, let's be honest, they've just gone backwards, haven't they? I mean, last season, they did have the Ferrari engine, which was certainly a struggle for them. But I just can't see them having a phenomenal season. I just, last 4 or 5 seasons, they've just gone backwards every season. And I think that'll be the worst performing car this season. I really do. I think they're going to wait for 2022. And they're going to really put everything into next season to try and kind of reinvigorate the team a little bit. But I think that's going to compromise this season. I just can't see them making a big step forward this season. I think it's going to be a season of growth for them. But I think they are going to be the worst performing team. As evidence there, so 1.4% overweight in the game, reduced to 1% like the other cars. Front downforce wise, I do think they'll be largely unchanged. I've given Williams extra downforce. I've just kept Haas at the same downforce level, more or less. Reduced a little bit of rear downforce, just because I just can't see them making any real gains. Drag wise, again, it kept it largely the same. Yeah, Haas for me, back of the field. So there we have it then, that's my predictions for the 2021 F1 season. Let's now get into a race on F1 2020, which is going to use the mods I mentioned at the start of the video for the visuals, and then my mods for the performance. And let's get into a race side by side with all that new good stuff and see how we get on. Here we go then, on the grid for the 2021 prediction race. See, we've got the, I'm going to say it, ugly Williams to our left. We're in the Red Bull. Going to try and have a good race here with our improved power. We should have one of the quickest cars. I'm just adjusting the fuel mix. Does absolutely nothing. Oh, God. There's absolutely nothing adjusting that fuel mix, but it just felt like I needed to. I'm going to put it back to standard just for the looks. Oh, God. Oh, God. Almost getting boxed in there by the name we won't mention. Around the outside of Russell, maybe up the inside of Russell. Magnussen's one of the few that hasn't been renamed. That would have been Mick Schumacher if we was able to rename him. Kimi Räikkönen up next then. Should be nice and easy pickings. The Alfa Romeo, in my experience, doesn't handle that great. With my 2021 predictions, although we're going slow. We've not got overtake mode on, that's why I forgot about overtake mode. We do still have that, of course, even if we even if the fuel modes are disabled. Gonna try on the outside of Raikkonen, am I? No, I'm not. Gonna wait for it. Now I'm gonna use my overtake. That means I've got a nice lot of overtake to use at least. Up the inside of Kimi Räikkönen. That quite good looking. Alfa Romeo, it must be said. This should be almost flat. Oh no, not from that line. It's not. Nowhere near. My word. Yuki Tsunoda's up next. Promising star. I'm excited to see what he can do in 2021. Let's try and get up to him though before we start talking about his chances in 2021. Here we go. Should better get him now with some overtake ERS. He's got the same engine as us, of course, but much less downforce. So managed to get past him nice and easy. Reasonably good looking livery. That, very similar to the previous years. They've sort of inverted it, but I'm happy with that. That means at least we get a different livery, if nothing else. Okay, I'm going to go inside of Sainz. Just going to break that early. Oh, a bit of contact there. Carlos Sainz, of course, in Ferrari for 2021 for the first season of him for Ferrari. Excited to see how he gets on. Didn't actually use all of our overtake there, but I mean, we've got a bit more to use on the following laps because we are going to run out of overtake come the end of this race. Got Pierre Gasly up next. Who, of course, stays in AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri, whatever you want to call it. Have I got the inside here? Yeah, go on, let's go for it. Absolute send. A little bit of contact there. He still turns in on us, but it's been well up his inside. Bit of wheel spin on the exit. Just about managed to keep it under control. Use a bit of overtake now. Let's try and get on Esteban Ocon up ahead. Who, of course, stays with his current team, but that team is now renamed to be Alpine. How do we say it? I don't know. I'm British. I normally get it wrong anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. Great livery, though. Really nice livery they've gone for. I'm really happy with that one. Kind of missed the yellow Renault livery, but actually that livery is really nice, so not too upset about that one. Really, really nice. I think, though, in my opinion, one of the best liveries is either that one, if not, it's the Aston Martins, which hopefully we'll get to at some point in this race. A little bit of a lift there, just to make sure we can get around the corner nice and safely. Just going to stick an Ocon slipstream for now. I'm going to save my overtake for the straight rush. Should be able to comfortably get past him. Superior downforce as well, of course, through these corners. A bit too much curb on the inside. That's going to push us out a bit wide, but we got away with it. Our downforce was enough to keep us on the car ahead. Bit of overtake, but I don't want to use too much. I think we've both switched it off now, which is quite convenient, so should be able to get up the inside of him nice and easy. Got quite low drag on that car, as I did have last year as well. Up past him nice and easy, up into the points-paying position. Charles Leclerc staying at Ferrari now, team leader, of course, though, for the first time in Ferrari. So let's see what he can do with that team. But Carlos Sainz, I'm sure, will give him a very good run for his money. A little bit of overtake on the exit here, just so we can get up speed nicely. That was the fastest lap of the race for us. Is it? Maybe? I don't know if it was. It was purple sectors, anyway. So let's see if we can get past Charles Leclerc. Do I dive here? No, I'm going to wait for now. Do I dive the next one, though? I'm going to go for the same move again. Just go for it. Oh, that was a bit much. Bit of wheel-to-wheel contact. That was a bit much, that one. But we got past him anyway. Thankfully, damage is off for this video. Got some DRS now, though, on Daniel Ricciardo, as he is in this mod. In that good-looking McLaren. Nobody hasn't changed too much year on year, but it is a good-looking car to begin with, so I'm not too upset about that. There's a bit of traffic here. Fernando Alonso is holding everyone up at the moment in his Alpine. Probably... Whoa, almost spun. Almost spun. Don't like the exit of that corner on this game. It seems to be off camera or something. Something's weird with it. But let's see if we can have a better exit through the next one on Daniel Ricciardo. I still have to take a lift because of the dirty air. Run a little bit wide, but get away with that. Looks like he used a bit of overtake on the exit, which we're not going to do. Yes, I suspect Fernando Alonso out-qualified his car, as I suspect he will do on his return. He's known to be a very good qualifier, isn't he? Very, very reliable performer. We're actually struggling on these guys at the moment. I don't think we're going to be able to get up to the Mercedes. I think they're away and gone, as I suspect they will be in the official 2020 season. Breaking quite early there just to try and hold a good line, but still end up running wide. Bit of overtake how I'm going to go for a dive here on Daniel Ricciardo. Nice and easy. Get it all slowed down. Lance Stroll in that very good looking Aston Martin. I don't know if it's just because it's new that I love it. I mean, Alpine's obviously new, but it's just something about having a green car on the grid. I'm no Aston Martin fanboy by any means, but there's just something about that car. It's just so nice and green. Do we go for a lunge? No. Oh, could have done though. Do I go for my usual move? Yeah, he's quite slow through that. My usual move, get it all stopped nicely. Past Lance Stroll, nice and easy. Bit of wheel spin on the exit, but we get away with that one. DRS as well for now. Getting up to Lando Norris. Lap 4 or 5. Only got 2 more laps to get past these guys. Let's try and at least get past up to the Aston Martin. Fernando Alonso, of course, although in this game he has just been renamed, so he's technically Daniel Ricciardo, but I would say actually their driving styles are probably quite similar, thinking about it. Because I imagine they're both quite aggressive overtakers when they need to be, but also very reliable performers. I'd love to see them in a team, actually, thinking about it. But anyway, back to this race. Bit of a lift there. Had a nice tight line there. That's better. That's what we need to see. That was lovely. Right up behind Lando Norris now. Should better get him comfortably down the next straight. But then again, he will get DRS as well. So we need to stick close to them through here. Magnussen Beckett's stayed in 6th gear there. Don't normally do that, but we managed to hold a good line nonetheless. Bit of overtake, but I want to save some of it for the last lap to be able to attack the cars ahead. Let's just hoover up all of his slipstream without using much. Overtake and dive up his inside now. A bit deep there, but we've got the move done. A bit wide, but we pretend that didn't happen. Fernando Alonso up next for P5. Really excited to see what he'll do on his comeback. He is, in my opinion, a little bit poisonous to teams sometimes. Potentially, but he is a very, very good driver. So I'm interested to see what happens with him in Alpine. Will there be fireworks? He certainly has created a few fireworks in the past, but he must have run out of ERS there because we were able to quite comfortably stick with him, get the move done. Sebastian Vettel up next. Of course, one of the biggest moves of the season. Over to Aston Martin. Oh, beard wheel spin. I've mentioned, of course, we are Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. That is probably the biggest move, and I'm really excited to see how Sergio does. He's had many podiums in the past, so I'm sure he will get a few more with Red Bull. I'm really excited to see if he can hold a candle to Max Verstappen, frankly, because the last couple of drivers that have tried, really promising drivers, have just not been able to do it. So let's see what he can do. But as I said, Sebastian Vettel, another one of the, probably the second biggest move, should we say, of the season. Over to what is Aston Martin. I'm sure he's quite excited to finally get his hands on a Mercedes engine. Aston Martin, the former Racing Point, the former Force India team, of course, known for getting good bang for their buck out of their budget. Increased budget, I'm sure. Now they've got Aston Martin branding. Feeling much better now. Now that I've not got any. There you go. He's run out of overtake ERS. That's going to be a nice and easy move. Now I didn't have much slipstream for that last one. That made that move nice and easy. Up through into P4. Best of the rest. That is where they will want Sergio Perez to finish all this season. If he can't quite be on Verstappen's pace, they won't be too upset because they know how incredible Verstappen is. As long as he's within a couple of tenths. He can't be 5-6 tenths back like his previous teammates have been. But there it is then. Across the line. To take P4 in our opening race for the 2021 performance. Hopefully you enjoyed that one, guys. That is my predictions for the performance for the 2021 season. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, and I thank you for watching. Bye-bye.